So I've just finished changing the radiator in the 2000 RAV4, and the reason it needed changing was a crack in the plastic tank, aluminum radiator plastic tank. And yeah, I'm just not a fan of plastic in a cooling system, but anyway, I thought it'd be kind of a fun thing to do is just see if there's any more cracks in it. So I thought I'd spray some dye on there and see if that shows us anything on plastic. Never tried this before, but we'll give it a go. I'll let that sit for like 20 minutes or something like that. And then I'll wash it off, wash all the excess off, and I'm just doing a sample, right? The bottom tank is probably just as bad, who knows, but I'm just doing this out of curiosity. We'll see. Alright, so I'm back here. I'm ready to clean the dye off, but before I do that, I thought maybe I'd give a bit of background into the process. So I think when this technique was first developed, it was called oil and whiting. So the idea was you took a part that you suspected might have a crack in it, and if it had a nice machine surface, easier to see for sure, so you'd coat that with oil. You'd coat the surface with oil and let it sit for a while. Could be hours, could be 24 hours, whatever it might be. So the idea being, if there's a crack, the oil will find its way into the crack, and when you wipe the residue off the surface and clean it up, there'll be no oil on the surface, but there will still be oil in the crack. So this only works for surface breaking cracks. Obviously, if it's cracked in the middle, this isn't going to help you. But if it's a surface breaking crack and has absorbed oil, absorbed is not the right word, its capillary action has sucked some oil into the crack, there will be oil left in the crack after you clean the surface. So that's what I'm about to do now, is clean this excess dye off of the surface of the tank here. So now we call it dye penetrant testing, but back in the day I think it was called oil and whiting. So the idea is, after you clean it, there is oil or dye left in the crack. This is a water washable dye, so I can just rinse it with water. Then you come back with a developer. Now they call it a developer. Again, when it was a young technique, it was called whiting, and whiting was chalk powder or talc, something like that, some white powder that you could put on the surface, and basically it would just draw the oil out of the crack. So you would see a bit of a wet line if there was a crack, right? So oil and whiting. Now we use a red dye. Well, I guess in this case I have a red dye. There's lots of colors. And the developer is white. And basically the developer I'm using is just an aerosol version. It's got talc or chalk or something in it. It's just super easy to apply, so we've made some progress, right? But yeah, so that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to wash this off, and yeah, then we'll develop it or put the chalk on there and see what happens. Alright, so I just went in search of a rag here, so not a very good one, but that's all I've got. So yeah, we're going to just rinse this dye off of here. You can see it's water soluble, right? And you can use an oil that isn't water soluble. You just have to find some way of cleaning it off. So you clean the bulk of it off the surface, and some is left in the crack, if there is a crack. So could you do this today with just oil and some chalk or talc or baby powder, something like that? Yeah, for sure you could. This stuff I've got just makes life a little easier. It's in an aerosol, and yeah, we're all lazy nowadays, right? So you want a smooth surface if you're getting started with this. If it's a real rough surface, like for instance on here, would I find a crack in here? Probably not. Everything's going to hold the dye and it'd just be a mess. You'd be looking at a background of pink or red or whatever color you're using, and you wouldn't be able to tell one thing from another. So yeah, a relatively smooth surface with not too much background noise going on would be ideal, I guess. But hopefully this works. I've never tried this on a plastic tank before. This is all new to me too, so we'll see how it goes. If it goes for a shit, well, there'd be no video, right? Okay, so the surface is dry now, and I'm going to spray the chalk on there, the developer they call it now. But so a couple of things to note. If there's a huge crack in here, when I first spray the chalk on there, it'll start to bleed. And it'll come up, and you have a couple of seconds to identify it, and it'll just keep getting redder until the whole thing starts to bleed pink and all the chalk sort of absorbs it, and you can't really see as well after a few seconds. If there's a pile of cracks, like a colony of cracks, you have even less time, right? So you want to look very closely when you spray the developer on at the beginning, and you'll see the cracks come up, and then if there's a bunch bleeding, they will just turn the whole thing pink, and you won't see, you won't be able to determine anything really. You'll just be looking at a bunch of noise. All right, so here we go. Shake this up. Not even sure if this is still sprayable. Yeah. Well, here we go. All right, can you see that? I hope you can see that. I mean, it's pretty obvious. These linear lines, I guess linear lines, that's a dumb way to put that, but linear indications, they're all cracks. I mean, this thing is just, it's just disintegrating, right? And now we're losing it. We can't see it anymore. It's all turning pink, but I hope you saw what we were hoping to see. The whole thing is just, it's just a colony from end to end. It's just completely riddled with cracks, right? Plastic in a cooling system, yeah. I mean, this thing is, well, it's 24 years old now, so I guess I can't complain, but what a dumb use of a material, really. I've got a brass tank and another vehicle over there, and it'll outlive me. I mean, it's older than this, and it'll go many times that. So, yeah, these modern vehicles, I call this thing modern. It's a Gen 1 RAV4, so year 2000 on this one, but it's got a plastic tank on the radiator, and I think newer vehicles have more plastic. They've got plastic, oil pans, plastic transmission pans. They've got plastic intakes, all sorts of plastic crossover piping and cooling systems. I mean, you tell me if you think that's a good idea. I don't think so. Anyway, that was worthwhile, I think. Just a bit of fun. The new one's in. If I get a few years out of that, I'll be happy. I'm pretty sure the modern one won't last as long as this original Toyota one did. I'm sure the plastic has gone downhill like everything else, but anyway, there's where we are. Sometimes, you can redevelop. If you get a lot of noise, like this is obviously gone now, so you can't see anything, but we can wipe that off. The sun will dry that up pretty quick. And you can redevelop, and now there's less dye to bleed. I mean, there was so much going on there that it bled pretty quick, and there was cracks everywhere. But now there's a little less. Might be easier to see. Since we're doing this, why not try it, right? Yeah. It's coming back again, right? I mean, I'm not an expert on plastic. I don't know how well it holds dye, but as this thing pressurizes, of course, the outside is going to, well, the whole thing expands, but the outside, the cracks are going to expand. So if we were to put this back in the car into service and do the same test, this thing would just be, yeah, I mean, it's just finished, right? Here it was leaking. I put this elastomeric tape over top of it, which didn't work, by the way. I wouldn't bother, but yeah, that was just a stopgap thing, and it did get us a couple of months out of this radiator. But thankfully the new one's in, and if you haven't changed a radiator on a Gen 1 RAV4, well, you're lucky. It's not pleasant. It's a pain in the ass job. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Here's a pretty good indication here. You can see how sharp that line is. That's a good crack. And the ones under here would have been way worse, but I'm lazy, so I didn't want to peel the tape just to make a video. You get the idea.